And one thing that's really interesting, and we're going to get to the former Attorney General Eric Holder in just a second here, but one thing, obviously, when you have a Republican House, when you have the Senate with the filibuster majority, it's really, really hard to get any actual progressive legislative items through. One area where the president actually does have power, and one where I'd actually like to see the next president really use this power, is actually through the Attorney General and what they can do. And like for example, the next president, a president could theoretically just say, I'm appointing an Attorney General who's actually going to hold Wall Street accountable. I'm appointing Attorney General who's going to do everything they can to hold murderous cops accountable. There's lots of things that a president can do to set the agenda at Attorney General, which actually does have a great deal of impact across the country. Even if legislation doesn't get through, the executive actually has a lot of power, and actually that's actually one area where the next president could actually really make some marketable change.
Yeah, and it's power specifically related to the black community. I mean, what we know is that the subprime mortgage crisis was the greatest loss of wealth of people of color in American history. And you had a black president that presided over a good deal of that. Not the beginning of it, but certainly the aftermath, and presided over a foreclosure crisis that where the president really did not pay attention to homeowners who were struggling and in crisis, and millions of people lost their homes, many of them people of color. So I would hope that this movement for Black Lives, is paying attention to one of the systems among the police system and among the economics or whatever system that you want to talk about that is corrupt and keeping Black lives down. The housing system is certainly part and parcel of that. And there was an opportunity to hold people who created this housing system that was basically used black communities for their own plunder accountable. And Eric Holder, who was an African American, was completely unwilling to do that. And now we know part of the reason why is because he ended up taking a job with Covington and Burling, a law firm that counts as clients all of the major banks in this country. And in fact, Covington and Burling was holding a corner office for Eric Holder while he was Attorney General and negotiating with banks who were clients of Covington and Burling. And this is the most unseemly thing. This should be an absolutely huge scandal. And the fact that it isn't tells you something about where we are as a country.
I'm talking again to journalist David Dayen, davedayen.com, on Twitter, @ddayen. Yeah, you and I have talked many, many times about how truly disappointing Eric Holder's stint at Attorney General was and how tragic it was. I don't see that many people writing about this, David. I see you and a few other people actually wrote about this, but this is something that really has gone under the radar, and I guess it just sort of goes to show how much, say, the Wall Street culture, obviously it controls both parties, but it controls the media as well, because that really should be something that should be a huge scandal that people should be screaming from the rooftops for, and really it's barely a peep other than you and a few other people.
Yeah, I mean, you're really talking about the bribery laws of this country. I mean, there are laws in the U.S. Code that prohibit this kind of quid pro quo relationship, where future employment can be seen to be dictated by actions taken in office. And while most of this is circumstantial, when you're building an office for the sitting attorney general, and when he buys a condo 300 feet from your office while he's still attorney general, I mean, the linkages here are really too big. Of course, we know that Holder was at Covington and Burling for 8 years while George W. Bush was president. At that time, among the things that Covington and Burling did was create the legal justification for MERS, which was this electronic database that allowed the smooth transfer of mortgages back and forth. Without MERS, you do not have securitization at the level that you did, and you do not have the subprime mortgage crisis at the level that you did. And Covington Burling was right at the heart of that, giving legal justifications for it. we know all of these things, and yet it is not a problem somehow when not only Holder, but there are now 7 members of Holder's Justice Department who are working at Covington and Burling, including Lanny Brewer, who was the head of the criminal division of the Justice Department. So this is like a shadow Justice Department that has sprouted up in a white shoe law firm that does white-collar criminal defense. This is a huge problem.
Yeah. Again, I'm talking to journalist David Dayen, davedayen.com, on Twitter, @ddayen. I want to move on. I mean, it's connected as well, but you actually wrote for First Look about a new way, not to mention all the past here, but you actually wrote about a new way that the Obama administration is allowing criminal banks to avoid consequences. This whole thing, it just keeps going and going. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so, first we had Eric Holder say that the banks were too big to jail, basically.
Right.
And that there would be too many collateral consequences. Then, after they got a lot of heat for that, they decided to start giving out guilty pleas. First, it was like small Japanese subsidiaries of foreign corporations. See, we got a guilty plea. Then they moved forward and gave guilty pleas to companies like Citigroup and J.P. Morgan Chase, forced them to plead guilty, the parent company, not a little subsidiary. But what they did behind the scenes was make sure that there would be no consequences for that guilty plea. And one of the places was at the SEC, where they set up waivers for banks who were convicted of some criminal action to continue their business lines. Particularly, this is in brokerage, basically. So that was one example, and we found another example last week. And basically, the Department of Housing and Urban Development changed a form that any lender who wants to make an FHA loan, Federal Housing Administration loan, and basically get mortgage insurance for that loan, so that if the loan goes bad, goes into foreclosure, the lender gets paid off by the government. It's government backed. It's through a fund that is paid for by borrowers, but if there's not enough money in that fund, then it comes out of taxpayer money. So in order to get this FHA insurance, the lender, prior to this point, had to make certifications that they had not been convicted of a crime, particularly, and not just in a mortgage-related capacity, but anything in the parent company. And what the HUD did was they got rid of that language. They said now that loan level certification form is gone, and there's a lender level certification that's much narrower than the loan level certification. So basically, the timing of this is very suspect, because there were rumors that Citigroup and J.P. Morgan Chase were going to be given this guilty plea. This is for the rigging of foreign exchange markets. And 5 days later, HUD changes this form. And they put it in the Federal Register, but they don't say what they're actually doing. They allowed a situation where they used a law, the Paperwork Reduction Act, where you didn't have to get public comment on anything you were taking away from the form, only things you were adding to the form. And so they were basically enabled to do this change under complete cover of darkness, and if it wasn't for sharp-eyed staffers at Maxine Waters' office and Sherrod Brown's office and Elizabeth Warren's office, who compared the two forms side by side, you wouldn't have known this at all, that they completely eliminated the certification that allows Citigroup and J.P. Morgan Chase to continue to make FHA loans, which are very lucrative, and that's essentially what they did.
Wow, and again, kind of the double standard where you see, someone goes to prison for a small amount of marijuana. That they have something that they go to jail for that. They have to check the box on every time they apply for a job, every single time. But a banker who ruined millions of lives, who cost the country billions of dollars, they don't even have to do that. They can continue doing what they're doing. It's sick.
Yeah, there's this movement around ban the box of stopping on employment applications this thing where it says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And so the government banned the box for banks, not for people. And in so doing, they eliminated the deterrent. Right. And in so doing, they eliminated the deterrent for committing crimes across every level of your business. Because if you have these consequences that affect your business lines elsewhere, you're going to be more likely to keep a lid on the practices that you're doing in other parts. So this was potentially an effective way of taming the financial system, but it's now these consequences have been thrown away, and now you have banks that are basically able to give a guilty plea and have nothing come of it.